on, you guys? Welcome back to Educate and Elevate with Pablo and Armando. Today's episode is going to be awesome. I know it's going to be a very high-level conversation with not only one of my own personal mentors and coaches, but really a dear friend and brother of mine. Before we get into the episode, you guys know that we always love to do announcements. So a couple of announcements that we have coming up. April 15th, for any Latino businesses that want to promote their business, we're having a small business pop-up in the city of Anaheim on April 15th.
Don't want to miss out.
You definitely don't want to miss out on that. We're going to have a couple vendor spots there, $250 to pop up your service. If you're a food vendor, it's $350. And then every year, right, the World Shakers Conference, the big event on September 29th, and the venue is going to be announced very, very soon. So be on the lookout for that. Speaking about World Shakers, this is actually an individual that spoke at the World Shakers Conference last year, and he absolutely just blew away the stage. So without further ado, I want to give a very nice introduction to my mentor, the founder and CEO of Giving Business Soul, Mr. Francisco Jara.
Thank you, brother. Great to
Welcome.
be here. Thank you so much, man. This is gonna be a fun day. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and on your guys' podcast and sharing. And I'm here in service, brother.
Highly anticipated podcast. We told yesterday with Nayeli, and when we told her you were coming, she was very excited.
Yeah,
and everybody else in the office as well. Like, we heard a lot about you, so we're very excited about this one. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really excited, man, to have you on, just because you know the journey.
Yeah.
My personal journey, not only in life, but also just business and everything. And something that I feel like a lot of people definitely, I would love to really just educate on this show, on this specific episode, is what you facilitate for individuals, right? Not only in the business world, but in life, and that's the rebirth, right? Talk a little bit about, Giving Business Soul. What is Giving Business Soul? What is the rebirth that we talk about inside of the community? And let's kind of just dive right into it.
Yeah, well, thank you for that setup. Yeah, sometimes it's a little challenging to language exactly what Giving Business Soul really does for people, but I think if you can put a word on it, that's probably a pretty accurate one. It does create a rebirth. And to lay a little bit of context, I think, one of the things that I'd love to share with people is that, I've been an entrepreneur now almost 24, 25 years. Privileged, grew up in an entrepreneurial family, so entrepreneurial stuff is in my blood. It's sort of embedded in me. And, and I got into it right out of university, got in the mortgage industry back in 2000. And I believe because of all the preparation, all the books that I had read, I had a really great trajectory. I did really well very quickly. I got a lot of discipline, a lot of will. And so I just applied everything that I learned. And so relatively quickly, this construct, this reality, it bends to discipline. And so when I applied it, I started to do really, really well. But as life would have it, God wanted to get my attention, and it sort of put the brakes around 2006, 2007, 2008. And that's when I went through what I call the Great Life Awakeners. I went through a stage 3 cancer. I went through a multi-million-dollar business bankruptcy, and then I went through a divorce, And so I went through those, 1 year after the other. So this is, in my opinion, something that moved me into the proverbial dark night of the soul, right? And essentially, life was sort of dragging me through a rebirth. It wasn't really giving me much of an option. And when I was sort of in that space, trying to get back on top, figure this thing out, life just was no longer responding to my discipline. And I was very shocked by that, because it always responded to tenacity and discipline and will and structure. And it wasn't until I went to the University of Santa Monica that I really began to understand that. And at the University of Santa Monica, they had a program back then to obtain a master's degree in spiritual psychology. And I knew about psychology. I didn't know about spiritual psychology. And I think for the audience to kind of understand this, psyche means soul. Ology is the study of. So technically, psychology should be the study of the soul. But when you look at the definition of psychology in the Western world, it is the study of science and mind and behavior. So they strip the soul out of it, like they do a lot of things. And so what spiritual psychology does, it reintegrates the soul into the psychology to truly get a deeper understanding of the deeper significance of your behaviors. Because as we all pretty much get a sense of, we are a soul and a body. We're both. And if we don't have any sort of frameworks to assist the soul and understand it, then we're pretty much lost in this world. And so when I went into spiritual psychology, and I heard those words like, your outer experience will be a reflection of your inner reality. And it was literally like a tuning fork, because as soon as I heard that sequence in that sense, I was like, okay, I get it. My inner world, because I have not healed, is a disaster right now. I feel like a failure. I feel like I'm not worthy of these great heights anymore. I mean, I felt down in the depths of the ocean floor. I mean, very, very dark. And when I heard that, I was like, the world is responding to my internal world. That's why I can no longer gain momentum. That's why the discipline is no longer working. And so then that's when I really started to go deep into the underworld, or the other world, my inner world. And once I started to understand, this entire sort of psychological framework, I was like, oh my gosh, like the moment that I started to address my pain and my trauma, like I started to elevate, and it felt organic in the expansion. It didn't feel like I was forcing stuff. It just felt like I took care of a trauma, boom, the external world then started to move. And so then as I continued that walk, I really started to understand that business is really a game of consciousness, and the more that I continued to integrate my unconscious, which really means to integrate your shadow. Most people don't even realize that there is a shadow. And if you don't even realize that you have a shadow, then it's that dark, okay? Because we have both sides of ourselves. Right? Carl Jung has this really famous quote. He says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. Right?
I have a question on the shadow.
Yeah.
I have studied a little bit of Carl Jung, and they did talk about people being scared of the shadow, because in the shadow, you might be feeling things like things that the society actually represses. For example, like you may actually have like a dark emotion, like I'm thinking of something, like you might actually want to hurt someone because of anger, fear, but if you actually speak that out loud, someone's going to look down upon you. So we repress those feelings, like, no, you shouldn't be feeling like that, or you shouldn't be feeling like that towards your friend because you're envy towards him, or you shouldn't be feeling like this towards your brother. But how could you help? How could we help actually even? How could you get someone to overcome that fear of the shadow?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think in our world, we've been programmed to sort of believe that the dark is evil, and the reality is the shadow does not mean evil. It just means an unintegrated part of our psyche, and so the way that I typically guide entrepreneurs in this rebirth is ultimately to look at everything that irritates you. Whatever creates a discomfort in you is typically where you'll find a shadow, and so when you're looking out into your clients, your partners, your wife, your children, whatever pisses you off is the clue, right? Because if it pisses you off, you're judging that as wrong or right, and the reality is there should be no judgment about that. It should be an observation about it. But if you're judging it, it's triggering something. So you at some point laid out a program or a pattern or a trauma that occurred. The way that I really describe it is this: is that everybody, especially in the New Age community, always wants to kill the ego. As an example, the ego is your booster rocket. Okay, the ego is a gift from God, and essentially gives it to us on the way in and says, hey, this is going to help you, right? And so when we come in, the traumas that we receive, the ego then comes in to protect, right? Because you don't have a defense system, right? And so it comes in and it wraps that trauma and it winds around it, and that creates a wound, right? So now that trauma is there, and then the shadow patterns end up coming from there. The tendencies end up coming as those really come as a trauma from, the trauma, then the shadow patterns come as a result of that, right? And so what you're looking at doing is the stuff that irritates you typically is going to lead back into those trauma areas, right? And so what you're doing ultimately, and the reason I say that it's a booster rocket, is that when you go back into those traumas and you reconcile them, meaning that you start to bring that higher level of perspective, then what happens is those wounds will turn into your wisdom. That is the source of where your wisdom will be coming from, a lot of it, right? And then when you untangle the ego, you reassign a job to the ego, and its real job is to establish connection with the divine. That's its real function. But at the lower levels, it's a protective mechanism to keep us safe in an errant world, in a world that's pretty trauma-based, right? But once you untangle it, you literally reassigns it. And just in the same way that for most people, it keeps them like the shadow and the ego is like, hey, you can't do that. You're dumb, blah, 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 right? All of that negative self-critical talk, at some point, it's going to do the opposite. It's going to say, hey, you got a divine mission. Get up. We got to go. There's a lot to do. It starts to be an ally versus a foe.
That's a very interesting perspective, because the ego, most people, like you're saying, it is good. Like when you need to go into battle, you need that ego.
You need that.
Yeah. But what about when you need to be vulnerable, and especially as a man, when our egos don't let us be vulnerable, especially even in the Latino community, you got a lot of machismo, like where, to be a little bit vulnerable myself, my family, like we don't ever tell each other we love you.
Sure.
Because it's just, and that's very common in our culture. And I know all my cousins are for the most part like that, like where we don't speak that language because of our ego.
Right. And I think the machismo is that the people are macho because they haven't fucking gone to hell. Go to hell.
Yeah.
You ain't gonna be very macho at that point.
Yeah. One of the things that I love that I really learned through this, and talk a little bit about, you have to go through hell, you have to go through darkness in order to get to the light. Yeah. I think that's one that just really it landed for me.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, especially in the Latino community, we have to go to hell. We have to go through that darkness.
Yeah.
To really rebirth again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's in the darkness that you'll find the light, right? From the Big Bang came the light. Yeah.
That's where the light shines the brightest.
Yeah, exactly. And so what Pablo's referring to is a metaphor that I like to use a lot, and it's really about the story of Jesus, Yeshua, right? And for me, that to me, the New Testament is a template. It's a template. So if you're listening, listen closely. This is a template of how you break out of the matrix. How do you break out of the world of duality, right? And in order to do that, you simply got to follow sort of that template, right? It's depicted inside of the resurrection story, right? In the resurrection story, it says that in the first night, Jesus descended into hell for 3 days, and then he rose into the heavens on the third day. Right, so the archetype code is, why did he descend to hell before he went to heaven? Right, that really indicates that if you are wanting to go to great heights, you will need to go to great depths. There is no alternative, right?
Jesus did it.
Yeah, exactly, and also the way that he alchemized, meaning. Think about his story, right? He goes through 5 major betrayals. And what he does is he takes the betrayal, which is non-love, and he alchemizes it with love and forgiveness. He takes the betrayal that's non-love, he pours love and forgiveness and compassion. And he keeps doing that, right? So he's literally alchemizing essentially that. And he goes as far as like when they spear him at the end, he says, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they've done, right? Demonstrating the capacity of the human heart to forgive. And just like that, right, that's a template of how you break out of the construct of the matrix, right? Because like him, we are all equal to the task that we're given in consciousness. He was equal to his mission. You're equal to your mission. You're equal to, if you start to get a glimpse of what your mission is, then you have within you the capacity to complete it, right? And in order to complete it, you got to do what he did. Go to hell. Go into the traumas that you've experienced and go and alchemize those with love and forgiveness, right? Because at the end of the day, what you're trying to accomplish is what he demonstrated. He demonstrated something that I call the great work. This is something like an ancient sort of understanding. And the great work is essentially any effort in the direction of spiritual liberation. Any effort made in the direction of curing the amnesia that the soul receives when it comes into the earth, right? To remember your divinity. And what they understood is there was no greater work than that, right? Because once you're able to achieve that, then you can literally be a conduit for God on the planet. Until you discover your own soul and your own divinity, you can't be the conduit, you know? And what he demonstrated is this concept that I talk about a lot. It's like what you're really attempting to do is that you want to die before you die, so that when you die, you don't die.
And
you see that? And the only way to die is you got to go face your darkness.
You got to take the dive.
You got to take the dive.
You got to take the dive. So I want to bring it back a little bit, because we went super high level there, right?
Yeah,
and,
I know.
and for and that's okay, because
and
that's exactly what we want, because what I say, you know, in business, in the world of business, you know, you talk about how us as humans, we move through, and correct me if I'm wrong, through 3 different levels, right? We come from human levels of consciousness of survival, service, and surrender. We could do business from these 3 different places. And I think that in order to get there, if I remember right, I did the roundtable a couple months ago, but us as humans, I think the statistic was 95% of us are moving through unconsciousness, and 5% of us are actually moving through consciousness. So a lot of these people may be diving into, they may not even be conscious that they're dealing with so much trauma, so many things in their past, right? We even talk about the developmental cycles we could even dive into. So how do entrepreneurs, how do us as people here that are living maybe in unconsciousness raise that level of a consciousness, right? Some of the things that we do are little frameworks or little skill sets, like, you know, breath work, or maybe even, you know, cold plunges. These are just some of the skills that we've learned, that we've acquired to be able to raise those levels of consciousness. But going back to that statistic, and then ways that we can now facilitate and be able to say, oh my gosh, here's the Great Awakening.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're moving through right now. We've talked about that inside of the community as well, is that we feel like we're going through a Great Awakening now. That's really what's going on right now. But society is painting, oh no, there's a virus going around. Right. Oh no, the economy's going down. Oh no, these are all political things. And we won't get into that rap, but talk a little bit about that framework.
Yeah. So what Pablo is bringing light to is the fact that most of the human population resides in what you can consider that survival state of consciousness. It's really a vibrational reality that really has to do with fear, anger, shame, guilt, apathy. Essentially, the lower level of human emotions is where the majority of the human population resides. And as a result of that, that really is sort of the matrix, because they continue to propagate, you know, all of their unresolved issues onto the screens of our reality, right? And so there are mechanisms to move yourself out of survival and into that state of service or surrender. And those are what you consider to be flow states, right? Flow states is a heightened state of consciousness where you feel and you perform your best. So when you do breath work, you do an ice bath, that moves you into a heightened state, right? And then you perform great. But what happens with these flow hacks, you default right back to your default state, right? And you'll just continue to kind of loop, and that's cool. At least you're getting productive. But there is a technology that you can apply that slowly begins to raise the vibration of that, so that your default state doesn't come down into that survival state, and it starts to gradually move into the service state. And there is a decent chunk of people now in that state. Of like I believe it's like 10% of people are in service state. And your consciousness, when you're there, you start to ask yourself the bigger questions, like, who am I? What am I supposed to be doing? How can I be of greatest service to the planet? How can I be a beneficial presence to those around me? If you're starting to think about those kind of things, your consciousness has probably already pulled itself out of that state. And now you're starting to go into, even higher states where you go into that surrender state. That surrender state is the land of people that have done sufficient shadow work. They moved into a place of self-realization, and they're more in that flow state kind of as a permanent place of residence. And that state is really kind of the biblical equivalent of not my will, but thy will, where you're literally surrendered and allowing life to kind of move you. We're very arrogant still in the human mind because we think we know better, right?
Wouldn't that be our ego, though? Like, kind of telling us, like, don't surrender?
Right.
I feel like that would be one battle that I would probably have is, like, my ego saying, don't surrender. Like, you want to take control.
Right.
But how do you... Isn't that kind of a compromise?
No, and it feels like it in the beginning. But when you begin to understand that there is a universal intelligence moving through you, and that there's 14 billion years of evolution as a universe moving through you, it's very arrogant to believe that we know better than that, right? This 14 billion years of evolution controls the tides and the waters of the ocean, migration of birds, season, planet, cosmos, the whole entire thing. Exactly. So it's like this current, what it is, it's like we just don't trust it. Trust is the doorway into surrender. And the moment you start to let go and you start to then being revealed like these great things as a result of not taking control and actually letting go, then it's like, oh man, that situation that just occurred in my business was because I let go. And then what starts to develop is like a muscle. You're going, oh my God, that was amazing. And then that was amazing. And then, oh my God, okay. Let me use this universal intelligence.
And what I would say to piggyback off of that is it's so important us as entrepreneurs to be able to have that level of consciousness when we have to, for example, an assistant leaves or, something goes south in our business. It's so important, not just in business, but just in life in general, right? You talked about your past and things that you went through, right? Things that we all go through. We may lose a family member or a loved one. How are we going to be able to hold that capacity and have that higher level of consciousness to be able to go through these obstacles and challenges that go through our lives? I think that's exactly, it's, it's not kind of to take it back a little bit. Armando was asking, well, like, he was very interested in like giving business soul and everything. And one of the things that I actually tell everybody is what you taught us, right? What you talk about. It's like, try to explain what chocolate tastes like. It's very difficult to have that level of high level conversation without talking about the basics.
Yeah.
Right.
And question that you asked too, because I didn't want to see like if an assistant leaves, a family member like passes away, God forbid, right? How do you maintain that consistency of that framework? Because we may feel good, but the moment we get a right hook.
Well, and that's when it really comes into play. Because everyone can do well when it's all flowing.
It's all good. Yeah.
It's all good. But what happens when it's that, right? Life can be cruel, but she is beyond wise. How many times has a life event happened where we cried at the beginning, and then 6 months to a year later, you look back and go, thank you. How many times? Yeah. Right? It's like it's like the winemaker stepping on the grapes, and the grapes are saying, don't do that to me. It's like, hey, I'm going to make you into a fine wine. You see? Yeah. And the thing is, again, it's very arrogant because we think we know. Yeah. It's like, how do you really know what your divine mission and what life in God is trying to move you to? Right. Is that in you somewhere yet? No, your consciousness isn't refined enough. And so I think when situations like that start to happen and you're going through it, it really is to surrender into what it is that's happening and start to get curious. Like, okay, what's here? Why is this happening? You know, maybe the assistant leaving is again because this next one that's going to come is in a whole different caliber.
Yeah.
And God knows that your business is about to elevate and you need a different player. And it just moved it out of the way for you and you didn't have to do it. You should really be thanking it, you know? But again, it's like, oh, woe is me.
That sense of gratitude that you have towards
Yeah.
what's happening, despite it not being welcoming in the beginning.
Yeah, at the moment.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, 9 times out of 10, on the other side of something, it's like, oh, okay, now I see it.
Yeah, later
You
on.
know? And I think that's a big thing is having the lens to see those things through.
So we talk about the 3 phases, right? The wake up, the clean up, and the grow up.
Yeah.
Right? And then we also talk about the 7 developmental cycles. So people may be listening to this and they're like, you know what? I'm ready to face that darkness. I'm ready to now start my healing journey to really be able to reach higher levels of consciousness. And in the beginning of the program, we talk about the 7 developmental cycles. Can you walk us through that example that
Sure.
of the pesos?
Yeah, for sure. So you know, one of the things that is really critical is sort of this the mechanisms of consciousness, the mechanics of consciousness. And as Pablo mentioned, it's the wake up, the clean up, the grow up, which leads to the show up. Right? The wake up, most people on our planet are beginning to experience that. They've had some sort of mystical experience where they feel the presence of God. They feel a connection to love. They feel everything is one. They've had maybe it was a birth of a son, a child, a daughter. Something happens that shakes up their reality. But then that fades away. You know, maybe they went to a ceremonial circle with a shaman, and then all of a sudden now they start to get back into the real world, and it's like, I can't quite get that sensation anymore. What's going on? Because that's only one phase, right? You just had a wake up, but now if you want to anchor that sensation in your day-to-day, you got to do the cleanup, right? And the cleanup, as we're saying, is really going down into the traumas. And as the more traumas that you heal, the more that you grow up, right? So you get to these higher levels of growing up where you go from just, oh, it's all about me, to now being inclusive to your family, to now being inclusive to your state, your country, the world, the cosmos. That's what happens the deeper you clean up. And the more you grow up, the more that you really show up in authenticity, the true wholeness of who you are. And what we teach is embodiment, which embodiment really is this idea that we are a physical being and a spiritual being. Right? And the frequency of your spirit is so refined that in order for it to truly be housed in the physical body has to be purified, right? Physically, emotionally, and intellectually, so that spirit can move through the biology unimpeded. You understand? It has to move unimpeded through the body. Right? And in order to do that, your physical vessel has to handle the voltage of that, right? And in order to handle, because most of our voltage, because of the food, the poison, we're in an evil labyrinth at this point. I think it's very clear. Everything is trying to kill us, right? The foods, the toxins, the environment. So we had to do the thing. We had to do the work of actually purifying it, the physical body, and then the emotional body and the intellect, so that thing can happen. And the way that we do that is what Pablo was mentioning about understanding that there is 3 developmental 7-year cycles in our upbringing, right? It's the 0 to 7, 7 to 14, and 14 to 21. We all remember from biology, the body regenerates itself every 7 years. And so from a developmental, standpoint, the first 7 years represent the physical development of your body, where you start to bump up against things and you start to kind of figure out what's safe and what's not. And then the 7 to 14, you develop emotional, right? Your identity, you start to have emotions. And then 14 to 21, you develop the intellect. And whenever you are in those cycles, if there is a trauma at that point in any one of those, if we take the metaphor that we start with 100 tokens of consciousness, and every time we have a trauma, we're essentially losing tokens of consciousness. Okay, so if you have one in the first 7 years and it's a physical abuse from your father that was an alcoholic, you lose 20 tokens as an example. And then you go into the second 7-year cycle and then you get hit again. The divorce happens from your parents. You lose another 10 tokens. And then in high school, when you're 16, you get your first really terrible heartbreak and you lose another 10 tokens. So now you're moving through the world and you got 60 tokens, right? So you've lost 40 tokens, and now you get in the world of business and you want to go to that next level, and you keep running a pattern and you just don't understand like what is keeping you away from these higher levels. And you can imagine a metaphor of arriving to a door, and that door is on the other side of it is the higher aspirations of your business. But the door says in there, says 80 tokens of consciousness required, right? So now it's like, oh, I only got 60.
Yeah.
You know, no wonder I keep sort of trying to bust through and keep getting knocked down. I don't have sufficient consciousness, which means you don't have sufficient power, you know? So now the game that you got to go do is you got to go reclaim those tokens. You got to go into the traumas, right? So then the people always ask me, well, how do I know what those are? Well, if you simply just contemplate, a lot of times you'll remember the traumas.
I like how you said too, like find out what irritates you on
That's
a day-to-day basis too.
Yeah.
I think it was Dr. Phil. I was watching. Oh, don't judge me. Don't judge me. I was watching Dr. Phil one time.
Yeah, that's all right.
And what he said, he's like, when you find something that irritates, when you don't like something about someone, it's more in a reflection of something you don't like about yourself.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, the mirror effect.
Yeah, kind of like, and I thought about that too, and it was kind of interesting to see, like, thinking about what you're saying now.
Yeah, because a lot of times those essentially, it's much easier to see outside of yourself than it is inside. But that's the beauty of the hologram. The hologram, like we understand that, you know, this somewhat of a simulation, or we're doing a lot of projecting. So it's much easier to see what disturbs you outside, but that's what's kind of cool. I like the idea of kind of gamifying it. Instead of getting pissed off, like you're literally, this is an Earth School curriculum, everyone. It's an Earth School curriculum. You come down as a soul and you're in a game here. And the game is, how do I reclaim my divinity? Right? And in order to reclaim your divinity, you look at everything in the field that is irritating you, pissing you off, anything that disturbs your consciousness. The codes of your own transformation are woven in the drama of your own life. You see that? It's like if you look at all the relationships you have, there's a theme. If there's a theme. Exactly. And it's like that's the codes to your transformation. You normally will see it. And it's like I don't hang out with that person because I don't feel respected, and that person doesn't respect. Okay, so there's I feel a lack of respect. That's the energetic signature. So it's like, turn that sucker around. When was the first, where are you disrespecting? Where are you disrespecting yourself? Where are you disrespecting others? And where are you disrespecting God? Yeah. Like one time I was working with an entrepreneur, and he had just, we were just talking. I love when that happens, when you just start to see it, right?
Yeah.
But I was with an entrepreneur, and he's just telling me, I just got rid of my assistant, and they were constantly late. It was starting to piss me off, and I talked to them a couple times, and they just late, and so I just let them go. And I said, okay. And I said, how you feel about that? Oh, good, because they didn't deserve to be there, blah 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 blah. And I did that thing to him. I said, okay, listen, let me ask you, why was it making you so pissed? Well, it's because they don't have discipline. I keep telling them to do something and they don't do it. I said, okay, let me ask you a question. Where are you doing the exact same thing? Where are you doing it with yourself, with others, or with God? And he kind of stood there for a second. He's like, I keep saying I want to work out and I don't do it. I said, exactly. And that's why you're pissed off at her.
Yourself, so it's a reflection.
It's a reflection. I'm not saying that you don't let her go, let that assistant go, but if it's pissing you off, then the issue is you. Because you could go into that conversation very neutrally with that person. And you can say, hey, we had our third conversation. It just doesn't look like you're really able to make these schedules. And so we need to run a business and we got to make it effective. So we're going to have to part ways. Right. And that's clean.
Yeah.
Because you're not upset about it. But if you're upset about it, 9 times out of 10, it's because you're doing the same shit somewhere in your own life and you just haven't been able to address it.
It's kind of like we expect more from others when we can't expect that from ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I have my notes, right? And the note that stands out to me while we're talking about this is anything that triggers you, exactly like you said, is ultimately a true reflection of our shadow within.
Yeah.
Right? And one of the skills that we should learn as entrepreneurs, as business owners, that vulnerability is actually a superpower.
That's right.
Right? Vulnerability is a superpower because we, especially us as men, like we have this machismo, or right, or we have this something inside of us that tells us that we cannot be vulnerable.
Right.
But ultimately, another note that I have here from the mechanics of consciousness, especially for you entrepreneurs that are listening to this, right? And I want you to elaborate this on this a little bit, is your business revenue is a capacity based off of how much emotional intelligence you could hold as an individual.
That's great. Yeah, that's a good
That's
one.
a big one.
Yeah.
So you want to make more money in business, you want to expand, and you want to scale. Well, here's a nugget for you, Mr. Entrepreneur or Mrs. Entrepreneur. Practice some vulnerability. Practice diving into that. Practice emotional intelligence, because the more emotional intelligence you're able to now acquire, believe it or not, that's going to make you a better leader. It's going to make you be able to have a bigger cup so that you can now start to fill that cup.
Yeah. I brought this up during the round table and the curriculum that I teach. But yeah, this emotional intelligence, I mean, if you talk to very high level entrepreneurs, a lot of times they're dealing with quite a bit. Like the example I gave at that point was my father, a big entrepreneur. And if you ask him like what he's got going on, he's got maybe 10, 12 court cases going on at any time, but when you talk to him, you really don't quite feel that. He's pretty grounded and pretty stable. And what I sort of inferred from all that is that the greater your emotional intelligence, the greater capacity that you have to hold emotional charge is directly related on how much revenue can really begin to move through your vehicle, right? Because money is energy, and it's the lifeblood of the business, and then the more capacity you have to hold emotional charge, the more that will allow you to move through it. Most real estate agents that I've done business with over the years, I mean, great people, but emotionally childish. It's like something goes wrong and it's like immediately there's this massive emotional reaction to it. And then you talk to a branch owner or somebody like that, it's like, man, they're just calm. And especially right now, if you want to be an anomaly, be calm.
Everything that's going on right now.
Dude, I mean, every room I go to, play around with it. I mean, you can feel the energy, and if you just go in there and you're so conscious that you're literally almost kind of like, in my mind, what I like to do is I like to have roots come from the bottom of my feet, and it roots into the earth, and for me it kind of feels like it develops like a nice stability, and it, like if you're like an anchor like that in a chaotic room, watch what starts to happen to the room. It literally, yeah. And that's an idea. Annabelle says that a lot, right? But it's like, don't be influenced by the room. Be the influence of the room.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that, speaking of Annabelle, I think emotional intelligence was that module inside of the round table where she just really just kind of blew everyone away. And speaking about Annabelle as well, shout out to Annabelle Vizcarra. She's actually going to be at the Flow Workshop this upcoming week. For those of you guys interested in that, we'll put all the information below and everything. You guys could get in contact with Francisco, with Giving Business Soul and all the great mentors. But going back to emotional intelligence, emotional intelligence is that how we could stay grounded, right? Everything could be going off around us, right? Recessions could be happening, et cetera, whatever, right? But when we have that emotional intelligence, I think that's a skill that I've really learned to really just, something that I do is like, I just take a deep breath.
That's something I was going to
and I'm able to just stay grounded now. And I think that's a really big one, especially for business owners, entrepreneurs, and leaders, because we have so many different things that are thrown at us from left to right. Being pulled in and out a bunch of different ways. Entrepreneurs, you have to be able to do that for yourself, because if you want to grow in the world, I believe it's like when you go on an airplane, right? And they say the airplane's going down. They say put your mask on first and then help the person and the child next to you. Well, we have to help ourselves first. And one of those skills could be by having higher levels of consciousness and practicing those little skills that, you know, obviously are through the flow workshop and, you know, through the coaching as well.
Speaking of the strategies, when I went to the flow workshop in November, I noticed that there was like 7 of them, but one of them was breathing. One of them was taking at least like a cold bath, right? Try to snap you out of it. What are some other things that you could kind of share with us?
Yeah, I mean, a good flow hack would be, obviously breath work is really great. The cold shower, a cold bath. I believe being out in the sun is a really big flow hack for me, like actually being out and moving. I don't do a lot of like weightlifting. I do a lot of more human biomechanical movement. And so by being out in the sun and moving in a natural biological way, I feel like it moves me into flow. I do love like sprinting as well, not only for the testosterone production, but also just because I love to move my body at that capacity. And so I think that if you're here to do great things, put yourself in uncomfortable situations. That's the key, right? Because your greatness is not going to come easy. It's got to come earned. And the better that you get at getting yourself uncomfortable and sitting in cold water. I mean, I laugh at shit that I do. I mean, like in comparison to getting into the cold bath at freaking, you know, especially recently when it's been like 40 degrees outside. It's like, you know, it's like I just did that. And like, so now I'm in a conference room and it's all heated. I'm just like grounded right in my body, you know? So I think for me, infrared saunas are another good way to do it. But most of the time, you could do anything that causes you to struggle in the beginning. That's why if you listen to come to the flow workshop, I'm going to go into a lot of detail inside of that. But you have to know the mechanism, and the first part of it is the struggle. And once you get through that struggle phase, then you can even go into flow when you're with the client. You know, how often have you done that where you just put your phone away, you know, and you're just there with the client? And all of a sudden you get into a wormhole, and all of a sudden it's like 90 minutes later. It's like, shit, 90 minutes just went by. Well, you went into a little micro flow zone because you were there, you're fully present, you're not distracted. And these are some of the things that are needed to kind of move yourself into that flow state.
What are the other, you talked about the resistance stage, right? Did I say that right?
Yeah.
What are
the struggle?
I think it's stirs.
Yeah. It's so when you're in flow, it feels like what they call stirs.
Okay.
It's selfless, timeless, effortless, and rich, right? The rich is you get a massive creative zone, right? Creativity goes out it increases by 600%. And the reason you go into the creative zone is because you go into like a theta state. Like you have these different waves like beta, alpha, delta, theta, and most people are constantly in beta. And if you look at what CEOs are looking for, they're really looking for creative individuals, people that have solutions, right? And if you're constantly in beta, that's just the prefrontal cortex. You're not going to be very creative. Imagine that all the wisdom is sort of in the ethers. It's kind of floating around, and your brain waves are going like that. It can't enter. You see, but when you go into the release and into the theta state, the waves go like they're more separated. So now that data that's always here, it's available, it's more accessible. You see,
like when those artists speak about like being stuck. Like, I'm just stuck in this rut. Like I can't get over this. Like,
right.
It's
Writer's block.
Yeah.
Something
Writer's
like that.
block. Yeah. Maybe that's like the beta.
Yeah.
Trying to reach that.
And they don't know about flow.
Yeah.
Most of the time. You know, and there's a great book by Rick Rubin that is now going to go in our library or light as part of our community. He's like a really prolific producer.
He's worked with Jay-Z.
Yeah. He just came out with a book called The Creative Act. Freaking gold of a book. But this guy's a mystic. Like you hear him talk and you're like, okay, this guy is fully tapped in.
Yeah.
But he's really understood on how you invoke the muse. In the ancient times, they called creativity invoking the muse. It's this sort of the goddess of inspiration, you know. And essentially, they always kind of felt like they had to like seduce the muse in order to for the muse to create the creativity. And he talks a lot about that, you know. But it's like essentially you got to create the space, the environment, and the situation to sort of bring that creativity or that muse through. But yeah, I think that's a key component in entrepreneurs. Like The more, if you don't know what flow is, learn it. And if you're not going to learn it, get out of business. You're just at a disadvantage. It's going to be like Chat GPT and no Chat GPT.
I mean, we mess around. I really feel like this is what I call the cheat code. It's the X factor. This flow state is what I call the X factor. Yeah. And I love that you just said that, because as entrepreneurs, if you're not willing to learn about these flow hacks and to be able to get into those flow states, get out of the way, because the people that do understand that and that they're willing to now dive into that state, they're going to just absolutely take over. And I want to touch on a couple of different things. Is that, so many times we see like music artists or people, professional sports or CEOs. I kind of like to put those people in a very specific kind of category, and they kind of want to be like each other. Athletes, high performers, a lot of high performers understand these flow hacks. CEOs, the really good artists, right? I wouldn't be surprised if somebody like Jay-Z does things like this, right? Sure. These flow hacks, because their careers are just so sustainable for so long, right? And what I want to say is that as entrepreneurs, you have to look at these flow hacks as that X factor that now is going to prolong your careers, prolong your businesses, your companies, to be able to really take you to that next level. I mean, these are really just like, they seem like the funniest things, right? Getting in cold water, or, going out in the sun, or, doing breath work, right? That's the biggest one. People kind of laugh in the beginning, right? I think it was, who was it? Remind me who it was. First they laugh at you. Gandhi, right?
First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win.
Yeah. I love that, because in the beginning they were laughing, right? Now they're really studying, and now they're like, okay, what are you doing? I'm going to these freaking flow workshops. And now I'm just like, exactly. Well, because you see that we're literally winning at a high level, and that is the X factor. I do want to touch on one more thing as well before we kind of wrap up. We could probably go for like at least another 2 hours, right? But we talk about the 4 main power structures, right? And how these flow states, I'm going to bring it full circle here, how these flow states, if you understand how to have these flow hacks in the world of business and what we're kind of building and trying to maneuver through, like in business, if we want to be sustainable, there's 4 main power structures that haven't maybe been able to sustain this for much, and they've fallen. Talk a little bit about those 4 main power structures.
I think this is, we're going to talk a lot about this in the next flow workshop, because I feel like what we're participating is in the evolution of the power structures, right? There is a real story that's emerging. I think we can all sense that the power structures that have held the modern world upright are showing signs of decay and corruptions, and they're no longer really working, right? And we have a window of time, as it feels to me, in this human story that's trying to emerge. And this is a framework that you'll be introduced at the Flow Workshop and inside the Giving Business Soul community. But if you want to shift a world, a society, you have to look at who's got the concentration of power. Right, the concentration of power is simple to find, because all you're looking for is those who have the largest buildings. Those who have the largest buildings on the landscape of the horizon represents the dominant power structure, the concentration of power. So if we go back historically, the largest buildings first belonged to the castles of kingdoms, and during that time, kings and queens sort of directed us, right? They held the most amount of power. Eventually, as we continue on the history, the churches became the largest buildings on the planet. And at that time, priests and popes were guiding humanity. Eventually, the Capitol buildings of states and countries became the largest, and with it, politicians and presidents started to govern us. Now, the largest buildings belong to business. So business is currently the dominant power structure. And for the last few thousand years, as the many have been hoping that the few would shift. Like, please, kings and queens, priests and popes, and politicians, can we get this thing right? We're asking them to please change the way you're doing things. This is not really working for us. And it's the first time in human history that we don't have to do that. right? Because we are all a part of this new power structure, right? Business now, as an entrepreneur, you can shift that, you can guide that. So if we simply show up differently as entrepreneurs, then we can move that power structure, right? And we're now experiencing the third industrial revolution with decentralization, things like Bitcoin, Amazon, EXP, Airbnb, these decentralized platforms where before, if we wanted to do something big, we needed a ton of capital. Right now, with a computer and a phone and these decentralized platforms, you can connect to these things and immediately you can start to move differently. You can move in a really big way. And as long as we start to integrate a different caliber of leadership in business in the way that we move, then we can actually, make society shift in a direction. And what I believe that the antidote is, it's a different breed of organization. A different breed of organization. The organization that I'm writing about, and this is what the Mortgage Phoenix Group is, it's considered a violet organization, like the color violet. And in order to sort of have a violet organization, it's based on very specific principles that I won't get fully into, but a big aspect of it is ultimately bringing into union within one organizational structure the two seemingly independent types of organizations that we've had on the planet up until now. Okay? And the two types of organizations we have on the planet up until now is business and nonprofits. And they have been functioning independent of each other, separated, right? Business is masculine. Nonprofits or philanthropic organizations that have a love of humanity, they're more feminine, right? And so what we need to do is we need to bring them into union, because the way that they're functioning independently, it's broken. It does not work. It's wounded. We got 1.5 million NGOs, and yet we have a world that's still falling apart. Yeah. We got business that is the dominant structure, but we got a world that's falling apart. But if we can bring them into union within one structure, I believe we have an antidote to get the planet in the right trajectory. Right. But from bringing these two things into union, the most important element is that the feminine principle, this philanthropic love for humanity, has to be the seed, has to be the conception. Right. And so for me, what we guide people is look out into the world and find what breaks your heart. Kind of like Nayeli. Yeah. Right. Like
we talked about that.
Yeah.
Yesterday.
What breaks her heart was the children not being educated. Right. So then she says, okay, that's where my heart is broken. Now I'm going to use my business as a vehicle to help alleviate that suffering. Right. Right. And when you do that, you're essentially having the heart lead the mind. Yeah. Right. The feminine principle, you could equivalent to the heart. And by doing that, then we can get the planet in the right direction. The Mortgage Phoenix Group was to build homes for women. And it doesn't mean that they want to clear that up. It's like, there's still profit. We're just saying to do a tithe or to do
to humanity.
Exactly. Right from the very beginning. And then from that. Now, in order to have a violet organization, right, there's this high level of vibrating organization, as a leader, the game is that you have to refine your consciousness sufficiently enough to hold the violet. Because the violet is more in that service, surrendered state of consciousness.
Kind of like the tokens.
Yeah.
Right? You got to have enough tokens.
You got to have enough tokens. Yeah. You got to be at full capacity to be able to hold that level of organization, because it's not do what I want to do. Yeah. It's more like I'm the gardener, and I'm going to just make sure there's the right nutrients, water, sunlight, and if there's an occasional weed, I pull it. But I'm not going to be dictating, hey, do it my way and this and that. It's a whole different, paradigm. And I believe that if as entrepreneurs, if we can refine our consciousness enough to establish these types of organizations, and you find what breaks your heart, tie your business to it, one, will shift the world. Two, you're going to finally hit purpose. And purpose is going to lead you into the fulfillment. And I was looking for purpose for 10 years. I couldn't find it.
Tony Robbins says that the greatest failure in life is to have success with no fulfillment.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly
That's
it.
a great antidote that you just said, to not have that.
Yeah.
Tie something that breaks your heart. That's awesome. That was a good one.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, Armando, like, that's essentially what we're doing with Educate and Elevate.
Yeah.
Is where our heart really breaks is there being a lack of education for a lot of people when it comes to even like financial services, education for the Latino community, right? A lot of things, and being able to raise those higher levels of consciousness, man. So, man, Francisco, I'm sure we could be here. We could be here for hours, man, and we could just keep going.
Yeah, my pleasure.
You asked the famous question.
Yeah.
It's good. I do notice that on your Instagram, you do post Kobe Bryant a lot, which we love, by the way, which was why we asked Chasing Greatness. Chasing and Greatness has the 8 of the Kobe, the young Mamba on there. So, like, what does Chasing Greatness mean to you? We know what it meant for Kobe. We know you love Kobe. So what does that kind of mean to you?
Yeah, Chasing Greatness. I mean, for me, at this point where I am in my development, it's really to fulfill God's mission on the planet, and I take the Mamba mentality. Yeah, I was actually just talking about it today. I said, look, we got to take massive action, and you got to go into Mamba mentality right now in our industry. You got to double down and go hard. But the game that I'm playing is really refine my body, refine my consciousness sufficient where I can be that conduit for God, and I can also be a reference point for other individuals that say, hey, I've always wanted to be in business, but I didn't want to do it because I just don't like sort of the paradigm and the way that it's structured. I want to find a more wholesome way to do it, and I want to represent that for people to say, hey, there is a different approach to business that we can actually become fulfilled. We can be leading our purpose. And to me, purpose is really living out God's will for you and your life on the planet, right? A purpose means to propose, to put forward. And for me, there is no greater greatness than that. And when I tell my son and everybody around me at this point that this is the mission, and you're going to have to fucking kill me to take me off that line. I'm going to die on the battlefield, right? And I think that that's the kind of energy that moves people.
Yeah.
That we need leadership that's embodied, that's transformative, and that's got conviction. But it's standing for something beyond fucking profit already.
Yeah.
It's like it's got to stand for something that's got a worthwhile endeavor. And I think more than ever right now, people want to sink their teeth into something.
Yeah.
It's like we're looking for freaking grit, like purpose.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I think God's soldiers are here. And if you feel like you're a soldier, send me a message. And if you're an entrepreneur, because I want to work with individuals that want to be on the front line with us. This is, in my opinion, the beginning of what Giving Business Soul is doing. And I'm looking for the generals on the field, people that that are just tired. They want to put a stake in the ground and say, hey,
It's
all
time.
right, it's time. Let's go in this direction.
Speaking about that, talk a little bit about the coaching program. I mean, I know we went through a lot of it,
Yeah,
right? But I guess in short, how could they get in contact with you? We're going to put all of Francisco's information down below. But I know you also have personal coaching that you take high executives through, or really just entrepreneurs through. The roundtable, how could they get in contact with you and everything that you're doing?
Yeah, I think that the best way is going to be just to go to my Instagram and go into the link tree. You can schedule yourself a clarity call to find out about the mentorship program. And essentially what we have created, Annabelle and I, is a curriculum to really begin to help the entrepreneur walk this sort of soul-centered path. And give you the tools, language, and the frameworks and the orientation to begin that process of like starting to look down into the basement of your own consciousness and starting to refine that. And that's the doorway in. So I won't work with anyone unless they're in the door. And now once you go through that program, and it's a 12-week leadership incubator, and you can go in and we can do it at any time you're ready. And then for those that go through that and are ready to go to the next level, that's when I offer now personal one-on-one coaching. And that's more like a 4-month program. And that's for individuals that want to begin to anchor in the Violet organization. That they say, hey, I really see where you're going, and I want that type of organization. Help me move the needle in my business so I can have that level of organization. But if you're out there and if what I'm saying is landing for you and your electrons are moving and you're getting this surge of energy, go to my Instagram, set up a clarity call, and I'll go through, see where you're challenged, see where you're stuck. It's so different to work with somebody that understands how to work in consciousness.
Yeah.
I'm not going to take you down a plant ceremony and say that's the fix-all, cure-all. It's like, you know, it requires a very delicate hand to work inside of that realm, and there's not a lot of people that know how to do it. This is where I'm trained. This is my world. I can move the needle for anybody.
I believe it. I've gone through it, man. I'm living proof of that
Yes,
myself.
you are.
Like, I have gone through the entire, round table, and I've had the opportunity to work nicely with you guys and everything that you guys got going on. But I guarantee you guys, this is not going to be the last time that we have Giving Business Soul on, that we have Francisco on. We're going to continue this. Yeah. We're definitely going to continue this relationship going forward on more episodes, because there's so much more that we could definitely do. But please, if you've listened this far, do me a favor. Go follow Francisco, follow Giving Business Soul, get involved in the following Flow workshop. I know we're going to have multiple throughout the year. Also, if you want to listen and you want to learn more about Francisco, he's actually going to be one of the speakers at the World Shakers Conference this year. So get your ticket to the World Shakers Conference too. That's at the end of September. So
yeah, I think just to close it, on the March 8th, that's when I'm having that workshop.
Yeah.
It's a historic Padua Hills Theater in Claremont. There's a VIP section where you'll be able to have dinner with me and Annabelle and the team. It'll be at my home. You'll be able to do ice bath if you choose to do that. It's a fantastic event. It's short, it's sweet, but it is powerful and can change the trajectory of your life. So, and it's from 9 o'clock to 2:30. March 8th, Wednesday next week, and you can get the tickets also in my link tree.
Yeah,
I'll be there.
for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah, but the team will definitely be there. Francisco, man, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For the knowledge, the wisdom, and just your time, bro. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Thank you, brothers. A pleasure to be here and to play and to dance. Yeah.
As always, educate and elevate with Pablo and Armando. Look, again, we say it every single time. We don't charge for these episodes. All we ask is that you just share it with somebody. That's the best way that you could just pay for this episode, pay for this wisdom, allow us to continue to influence and impact others. We're here to educate, to elevate the minds of other people. So do us a favor, like, subscribe to the channel, share it with somebody if you found value in it, because I guarantee you this is going to be an episode that's going to impact the lives of many, 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 many people. So as always, if nobody loves you, Pablo and Armando love you, and we will see you guys on the next episode of Educate and Elevate.